You think a cheap suit and a law degree make you one of us, boy? Detective Roman Thornfield roared, his voice cracking like a whip across the silent courtroom. He slammed his fist onto the witness stand, leaning so far forward his spittle flecked the defense table. You're nothing but a street rat playing dress-up. I put criminals away. You uncuff them. A gasp swept through the gallery. Darius Pennington didn't flinch, though his knuckles turned white as he gripped his pen. Objection, he said, his voice deadly calm. Overruled, Judge Rosalind Gray muttered, not looking up. Answer the question, detective, but watch your tone. Roman smirked, cold and predatory. The trap was set. The air in courtroom 1B was stagnant, heavy with the scent of floor wax and old timber, but to Darius Pennington it smelled like a slaughterhouse. He sat alone at the defense table, his posture rigid, the cheap fabric of his suit scratching against his neck. Beside him, the empty chair of his client, a 19-year-old kid named Leo, who was currently holding his head in his hands in the holding cell, felt like a gaping wound. On the witness stand sat Detective Roman Thornfield. Roman was a man carved from granite and arrogance, a 20-year veteran of the force with a clearance rate that made him a local deity and a reputation for brutality that made him a demon in the neighborhoods Darius grew up in. Roman wore his tailored suit like armor, his badge gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights, a silent testament to his untouchability. Across the aisle, Prosecutor Griffin Ashford leaned back in his leather chair, tapping a gold pen against his chin. Griffin was the golden boy of the district attorney's office, smooth, Ivy League, and as corrupt as a rotting apple core. He and Roman were a package deal. Roman kicked down the doors, and Griffin buried the bodies under mountains of legal paperwork. Together they had built careers on the backs of men who looked exactly like Darius. Detective Thornfield, Griffin said, standing up with a languid grace. Could you clarify for the jury how you came to arrest the defendant? Roman shifted, flashing a charming, confident smile at the jury box. The jurors, mostly suburbanites who looked at Roman and saw a hero, leaned in. Simple, counselor. We got an anonymous tip about a break-in at the jewelry store on 5th. When we arrived, the suspect was fleeing the scene. He matched the description perfectly. Hoodie, jeans, running like he had the devil at his heels. And did you find the stolen merchandise? We found a necklace in his pocket, Roman lied. The words came out smooth, practiced. Classic smash and grab. He was desperate. Darius felt a burn in his chest. The police report had mentioned no necklace found on Leo's person at the scene. It was discovered in the squad car later. A classic plant. But every time Darius had tried to suppress the evidence, Judge Rosalind Gray had shut him down. Judge Gray sat high on the bench, her face an unreadable mask of indifference. She was new to this circuit, a transfer from upstate, and rumors swirled that she was tough on crime and even tougher on defense attorneys who wasted her time. So far, she had overruled nearly every objection Darius had raised, feeding Roman's ego until the detective looked ready to burst. "Thank you, detective," Griffin said, sitting down with a satisfied smirk. "Your witness, Mr. Pennington." Darius stood up. He buttoned his jacket, taking a slow breath. He knew what they saw when they looked at him. An affirmative action hire, a public defender with too many cases and too little sleep, a black man in a system designed to crush him. But they didn't see the fire. They didn't see the weeks he had spent digging into Roman Thornfield's past, the connections he was slowly piecing together. He approached the stand. Roman watched him come, eyes narrowing with disdain. "Detective Thornfield," Darius began, his voice steady, projecting to the back of the room. "You stated that the defendant matched the description perfectly. Can you tell the court what that description was?" Roman scoffed, picking at a piece of lint on his cuff. "Black male, 5'9" to 6 foot, hoodie." "That describes half the population of this city, detective," Darius said dryly. Was there anything specific? A scar? A tattoo? A logo on the hoodie? He was running, Roman snapped. Innocent people don't run. People run when they're scared, Detective. Especially when an unmarked car screeches up onto the sidewalk and men with guns jump out screaming. Darius picked up a file from his table. Now, about this necklace. Your initial field notes, time stamped 10:42 p.m. Don't mention a necklace found during the pat-down. Yet the evidence log shows a necklace booked at 11:30 p.m. That's a 48-minute gap. Where was the necklace during that time? Roman leaned forward, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. It was in his pocket. My partner missed it. Unlike you, Mr. Pennington, real police work is chaotic. We don't sit in air-conditioned offices splitting hairs. We're out there saving the city from trash like your client. Objection, Darius shot back, badgering the counsel in character assassination. Sustained, Judge Gray said, though she sounded bored. Stick to the facts, Detective. The fact is, Roman continued, ignoring the judge, talking directly to the jury, this lawyer is trying to use technicalities to put a thug back on your streets. He doesn't care about justice. He cares about his paycheck. Darius tightened his grip on the lectern. I'm a public defender, Detective. My paycheck wouldn't cover your dry cleaning. I care about the truth. And the truth is, you didn't find that necklace on Leo. You put it there. The courtroom erupted. Griffin Ashford shot out of his chair. Objection! That is a baseless accusation. Sustained! Judge Gray slammed her gavel. Mr. Pennington, tread carefully. You are accusing a decorated officer of a felony. I am accusing him of lying, Your Honor, Darius said, his voice rising. Roman laughed, a harsh barking sound. You're a joke, Pennington. You're out of your league. Why don't you go back to traffic court where you belong? Darius stared at him. The humiliation was the point. Roman wanted him angry. He wanted him to lose control. If Darius snapped, he lost the jury. If he stayed silent, he looked weak. It was a lose-lose scenario, orchestrated perfectly by a man who had played this game 1,000 times. But Darius wasn't playing Roman's game. He was playing a much longer one. The afternoon session was brutal. The sun slanted through the high windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, highlighting the exhaustion on the jurors' faces. They were tired, and Roman Thornfield was their entertainment. Griffin Ashford called his next witness, a pawnshop owner named Silas Vane. Silas was a greasy man with shifting eyes, clearly intimidated by the atmosphere, or perhaps by the detective sitting in the front row, staring at him intently. Mr. Vane, Griffin said soothingly, do you recognize the defendant? Silas squinted at the empty chair next to Darius, then at a photograph Griffin held up. Yeah, that's him. Came in 2 days before the robbery. Looking at the jewelry. Darius wrote furiously on his notepad. Liar. He had security footage from a bodega across town that placed Leo miles away at that time. But he couldn't introduce it yet. He had to let them build their tower of lies first. When it was Darius's turn to cross-examine, Roman let out a loud, theatrical yawn from the gallery. A few jurors chuckled. The disrespect was palpable, a physical weight pressing down on Darius's shoulders. Mr. Vane, Darius asked, walking to the witness box. You say my client was in your shop on the 14th. What did he buy? Nothing. Just looked. Acted suspicious. Suspicious how? Shifty. Kept looking at the cameras. Like you are right now? Darius asked sharply. Objection, Griffin called out lazily. Withdrawn. Darius didn't look away from Silas. Mr. Vane, do you have a current license to operate your business? Silas froze. His eyes darted to Roman in the gallery. Roman gave a barely perceptible nod. Yeah, of course. And are you aware that perjury is a felony, Mr. Vane? I ain't lying, Silas cracked, his voice pitching up. He was there. Detective Thornfield showed me his picture and I remembered him. Ah, Darius said, pouncing. Detective Thornfield showed you a picture. Did he show you a photo array, a lineup, or just one single photo of my client and ask, "Is this the guy?" Silas stammered. I don't remember. Let me refresh your memory. Darius pulled a document from his stack. This is a statement from your assistant, Ms. Opal Vaughn. She says Detective Thornfield came in alone, flipped his badge, showed you one photo, and told you that if you didn't cooperate, he'd find a reason to shut you down for selling stolen goods. The courtroom went silent. Griffin was on his feet instantly. Objection, hearsay, and Ms. Vaughn is not on the witness list. She is a rebuttal witness, Your Honor, Darius said calmly, turning to Judge Gray, and her statement goes directly to the credibility of this witness and the conduct of the investigating officer. Judge Gray looked at Darius, her eyes sharp behind her spectacles. For the first time, the mask of indifference slipped, replaced by a flicker of interest. Or was it annoyance? I'll allow the question, but you better produce Ms. Vaughn, counselor, the judge warned. Darius turned back to Silas. Did the detective threaten you, Mr. Vane? Silas looked like he was about to vomit. He looked at Roman again. Roman wasn't nodding anymore. His face was a thunderhead, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle feathered in his cheek. He drew a finger across his throat, a subtle gesture hidden from the judge by the angle of the bench, but visible to Silas. No, Silas whispered, looking at his lap. He didn't threaten me. I remembered the boy. Darius sighed. He had lost the witness, intimidated into submission. But he had planted the seed. He looked at the jury. A few of them looked uncomfortable. Good. No further questions? As Darius walked back to his table, Roman leaned over the railing as he passed. Nice try, kid, Roman whispered, low enough that only Darius could hear. But nobody cares what a junkie pawnbroker thinks, and nobody cares what you think. You're embarrassing yourself. Why don't you quit while you still have a career? Darius sat down, organizing his papers with geometric precision. I'm not the one who should be worried about my career, Roman, he muttered to himself. The rest of the afternoon was a barrage of technical experts, all led by Griffin to paint a picture of Leo as a violent, desperate criminal. But through it all, Roman sat there, a king in his court, smirking, shaking his head at Darius's questions, making audible scoffs. At one point, during a recess, Darius went to the men's room to splash water on his face. The door banged open, and Roman walked in, followed by Griffin. This is the men's room, Pennington, Roman sneered, moving to the sink next to him. Staff toilets are down the hall. Give it a rest, Roman, Griffin said, checking his hair in the mirror. Let the man wash the failure off his face. I just don't get it, Roman said, turning to face Darius, boxing him in against the sink. He loomed over him, physically imposing. Why fight so hard for a loser? Leo is trash. His father was trash. You're defending a genetic mistake. Darius dried his hands slowly with a paper towel. He turned to face Roman, meeting his gaze. Because the Constitution doesn't come with an asterisk for people you don't like, Detective. Roman laughed, a cruel, gut-deep sound. The Constitution is a piece of paper. In this building, I am the law. I decide who walks and who rots. And you? You're just a speed bump. A diversity hire speed bump. Is that what this is about? Darius asked softly. You hate that I'm here? That I wear the same suit? I hate that you think you're smart, Roman spat. You think you can come into my city, question my integrity? I'm going to destroy you, Pennington. Not just this case. You. By the time I'm done, you won't be able to get a job sweeping floors in this courthouse. We'll see, Darius said, tossing the paper towel into the trash can. He walked past them, his shoulder brushing Roman's. Watch your back, counselor, Roman called out. Darius walked out, his heart hammering against his ribs. He wasn't afraid of the threat. He was afraid because he knew Roman meant it. But what Roman didn't know was that Darius had an ace up his sleeve. a witness that Roman thought was long gone. The second day of the trial began with a heaviness that felt physical. The air conditioning had malfunctioned, and the courtroom was sweltering. Tempers were short. Darius called his first witness. The defense calls Haven Quinn. A ripple of confusion went through the prosecution table. Griffin frowned, flipping through his files. Roman, however, went rigid. His tan skin seemed to pale by a shade. The doors opened, and a woman walked in. Haven Quinn was striking, with sharp features and eyes that had seen too much. She walked with a limp, using a cane, but her head was held high. She wore a modest dress, but the tattoos peeking out from her collar spoke of a harder life. She took the stand. "Ms. Quinn," Darius began, "can you tell the court your relationship to the defendant?" "I'm his aunt," she said, her voice raspy. "His mother's sister." "And where were you on the night of the arrest?" "I was at the station," she said. "I went to pick up Leo's things." "Did you see Detective Thornfield there?" Haven's eyes locked onto Roman. The hatred in her gaze was potent enough to blister paint. "I saw him." "What was he doing?" "He was in the parking lot," Haven said, "with another man, a man I know as Snake." Roman jumped up. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant. This woman is a known felon." "Sit down, Detective," Judge Gray barked. "You are a witness in this trial, not the prosecutor. Mr. Ashford, if you have an objection, make it." Griffin stood slowly, looking unsure. "Relevance, Your Honor." "I am establishing a pattern of conduct," Darius said. "Ms. Quinn, what did you see?" "I saw the detective hand a bag to Snake, and I heard him say, 'Plant it deep. Make sure the kid takes the fall.' Then he laughed. He laughed like it was a game." The gallery murmured. Roman was shaking his head, a manic grin on his face. "She's lying. She's a junkie. I arrested her 3 times for possession." "Is that true, Miss Quinn?" Darius asked. "I've been clean for 5 years," she said steadily, "since the day you broke my arm during an arrest for a crime I didn't commit." She lifted her cane. "You remember this, Roman? You remember snapping the bone because I wouldn't tell you where my brother was?" "You resisted arrest," Roman shouted, losing his composure. "You attacked an officer." "I was in handcuffs," Haven screamed back. "Order! Order in this court!" Judge Gray slammed her gavel, the sound cracking like a gunshot. The silence that followed was ringing. Roman stood there, chest heaving, face red. He realized he had made a mistake. He had engaged. Griffin Ashford looked pale. He tugged on Roman's sleeve, pulling him down. "Ms. Quinn," Darius continued, his voice soft now. "Did you see anything else?" "I saw him take a necklace out of his own pocket," she said. "Before he went into the booking room, he wiped it on his shirt and put it in an evidence bag. He didn't find it on Leo. He brought it with him." Darius turned to the jury. They were wide-eyed. The seed of doubt had sprouted into a vine. "Your witness," Darius said to Griffin. Griffin's cross-examination was weak. He tried to attack Haven's past, her addiction, her criminal record. But Haven owned it all. She admitted her faults, which only made her accusations against Roman feel more authentic. She had nothing to lose. When Haven stepped down, the atmosphere in the room had shifted. It wasn't just a trial anymore. It was a war. Roman took the stand again for rebuttal. He was calmer now, the mask back in place, but his eyes were burning coals. "Detective," Griffin asked, "do you know that woman?" "I've arrested her," Roman said dismissively. "She holds a grudge. It's common with these people. They blame the police for their own bad choices." "Did you plant evidence?" "Absolutely not. The suggestion is insulting." "Thank you." Darius stood up. He didn't go to the podium. He walked right up to the witness stand, entering Roman's personal space. "You say these people a lot, Detective," Darius said. "Who exactly are these people?" Roman smiled, a thin, cruel line. "Criminals. Scum. People who drain society." "People like me?" Darius asked. "If the shoe fits." You said earlier that I wasn't one of us, that I was playing dress-up. Do you remember that? I said a lot of things. Do you believe that a black man cannot be a good lawyer without being a street rat? Objection! Griffin yelled. Argumentative! Overruled, Judge Gray said sharply. I want to hear the answer. Roman leaned forward. He looked at the jury, then at the judge, and finally at Darius. The arrogance that had protected him for 20 years, the shield of the badge, made him reckless. He thought he was untouchable. He thought the judge was on his side because she was part of the system. I think, Roman said, his voice dripping with condescension, that some people are born to uphold the law and some are born to break it. And no matter how many degrees you buy, you can't change your nature. You defend them because you are them. You're just a thug in a suit, Pennington. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum, sucking the air out of the room. Roman smiled, thinking he had delivered the ultimate insult, the crushing blow. But Darius didn't flinch. He didn't scream. He simply looked at Roman with a profound, terrifying pity. Thank you, Detective, Darius said quietly. No further questions. As Darius walked back to his table, he saw Griffin Ashford put his face in his hands. Griffin knew. He knew Roman had just handed the defense a mistrial on a silver platter, or worse. He had exposed his bias to the world. But Darius wasn't aiming for a mistrial. He was aiming for a conviction. Not for Leo. For Roman. Darius sat down and pulled a small black USB drive from his pocket. He placed it on the table. It was the loose thread he had been pulling on for months. The evidence that would turn this from a case of bias into a case of criminal conspiracy. He looked up at the judge. Judge Gray was staring at Roman Thornfield. Her expression had changed. The indifference was gone. In its place was a cold, hard fury. And for the first time, Detective Roman Thornfield felt a flicker of fear. The USB drive sat on the defense table, a small, innocuous rectangle of black plastic that seemed to pulse with a gravity all its own. The silence in the courtroom following Darius's declaration stretched thin, vibrating with tension. Mr. Pennington, Judge Gray said, her voice cutting through the thick atmosphere. What is this? This, Your Honor, Darius said, picking up the drive, is dashcam footage from a patrol vehicle parked directly across the street from the arrest scene, a patrol vehicle that Detective Thornfield claimed was out of commission. Roman Thornfield let out a scoff, though it sounded wet and forced. This is a fishing expedition, Your Honor. That car was in the shop. The camera wasn't recording. That's what the official report says, Darius countered, turning his body so the jury could see his profile, sharp and unyielding. But as the court knows, the new model cruisers have a backup battery system for the surveillance units. They record on a loop even when the engine is off, for exactly situations like this. It seems the detective forgot to scrub the hard drive before he had the maintenance logs altered. Objection! Griffin Ashford shot up, but his movements were jerky, lacking his usual languid grace. Sweat beaded on his upper lip. Counsel is testifying, and this evidence was not disclosed during discovery. It was discovered yesterday, Darius said smoothly. Anonymous source. Case law allows for the admission of new evidence if it is exculpatory and was previously suppressed by the prosecution or the investigating officers. Brady v. Maryland, Your Honor. Judge Gray held out her hand. Bring it here. Darius walked to the bench. He could feel Roman's eyes boring into his back, a sensation like a physical heat. He handed the drive to the clerk, who plugged it into the court's AV system. I want the jury removed while we review this, Griffin pleaded, desperation seeping into his tone. Denied, Judge Gray said, her eyes cold. If the detective has nothing to hide, he has nothing to fear. Play it. The large screens mounted on the courtroom walls flickered to life. The timestamp read 10:38 p.m. The angle was low, shooting through the windshield of a parked cruiser. It showed the sidewalk where Leo had been arrested. The streetlights cast long, jagged shadows. On screen, Leo was already in handcuffs, pressed against the hood of Roman's unmarked sedan. He looked terrified, shaking. Roman stood behind him, patting him down. The courtroom watched in breathless silence. On the video, Roman pulled his hands away from Leo's pockets. He held them up, showing empty palms to his partner, who was out of frame. "Clean!" Roman's voice came through the speakers, tinny but distinct. "Kid's got nothing." Then the camera caught it. A movement so subtle it would have been missed by the naked eye in real time, but magnified on the 60-inch screens, it was undeniable. Roman reached into his own jacket pocket. His hand emerged, clenching a glittering object. He looked left, then right. He didn't look at the parked cruiser across the street. He shoved the object, the diamond necklace, into Leo's back pocket. "Wait," the on-screen Roman said, stepping back and raising his voice theatrically. "Hold on. What's this?" He reached back into Leo's pocket and pulled the necklace out, holding it up to the light like a trophy. "Gotcha." Leo's on-screen voice was a wail of confusion. "That's not mine. You put that there." "Shut up, scumbag," Roman snarled on the video, shoving Leo's face into the hood. The screen went black. For 3 seconds, nobody breathed. The reality of what they had just seen hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It wasn't just police misconduct. It was a performance of villainy captured in high definition. Darius turned to the witness stand. Roman was no longer smirking. His face had drained of blood, leaving his skin a sickly ash-gray color. His mouth hung slightly open as if his jaw hinge had broken. "Detective Thornfield," Darius said, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried to the back of the room. "Is that you on the screen?" Roman didn't answer. He couldn't. "The video timestamp is 10:41 p.m., Darius continued, relentless. 1 minute before your field notes claim you arrived on the scene. You were there early. You set the stage. You planted the evidence." It's out of context," Roman croaked. He looked at the jury, searching for a sympathetic face, but found only shock and disgust. "Out of context?" Darius asked, stepping closer. "You took a piece of jewelry from your pocket and placed it on a 19-year-old boy. In what context is that acceptable police procedure? Is that saving the city, detective?" Roman's eyes darted around the room, frantic. We knew he did it. We just needed to make it stick. The system is broken. You have to bend it sometimes." "So you admit it?" Darius asked. "You admit you framed him?" "I admit I did what had to be done," Roman roared, slamming his hand on the railing. "Because lawyers like you let the guilty walk. I am the only thing standing between these people and chaos." "Detective Thornfield," Judge Gray's voice was like ice cracking. "You will lower your voice." But Roman was past listening. The humiliation was burning him alive. He had been stripped naked in front of the people he viewed as his subjects. "You don't get it," he shouted at the judge. "I am a hero. I have put away hundreds of animals. I deserve a medal, not this witch hunt." Darius stood perfectly still, letting Roman dig his own grave. "No further questions, Your Honor." The recess that followed was a chaotic blur. Reporters were practically clawing at the doors to get out and file their stories. The hallway buzzed with the electric energy of a scandal breaking in real time. Inside the courtroom, however, the atmosphere was funereal for the prosecution. Griffin Ashford sat with his head in his hands. He wasn't looking at Roman. He was looking at his career dissolving into dust. When court reconvened, Griffin stood up slowly. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. "Your Honor," Griffin said, his voice shaking, The people moved to dismiss all charges against the defendant Leo Vance with prejudice." A cheer erupted from the gallery. Leo's family, Haven Quinn, and community members who had packed the benches. Judge Gray banged her gavel, but there was no real heat in it. "Motion granted," she said. "Mr. Vance, you are free to go. The bailiffs will process your release immediately. Darius turned to the empty chair beside him and smiled. It was a small, sad smile. Leo was free, but the boy would never be the same. However, Judge Gray continued, her gaze shifting to the witness stand where Roman still sat, effectively trapped by the procedure. We are not finished here. Mr. Pennington, you indicated you had further evidence regarding the detective's conduct? I do, Your Honor, Darius said. The defense, now acting as a friend of the court, would like to recall Opal Vaughn to the stand. We believe her testimony regarding intimidation is relevant to a broader obstruction of justice inquiry. Roman stood up. This is a trial for a robbery. The charges are dropped. I'm leaving. Sit down, detective, Judge Gray yelled. You are under subpoena. You leave when I say you leave, or do you want to add contempt to your growing list of problems? Roman sank back into the chair, seething. He looked at Griffin. Do something, you coward. Griffin didn't even look at him. He was busy scribbling on a notepad, likely drafting his resignation or a plea deal for himself. Opal Vaughn took the stand. She was a small woman, nervous, wringing her hands. But when she looked at Roman, there was a spark of defiance. Ms. Vaughn, Darius asked, you mentioned earlier that Detective Thornfield threatened you. Did he mention anyone else? Yes, Opal said quietly. He said he had the district attorney in his pocket. He said Griffin will bury anything I tell him to bury. He said they had a system. Darius looked at Griffin. The prosecutor flinched. And did he tell you why he wanted Leo Vance specifically? He said, Opal hesitated, glancing fearfully at Roman. He said, the sins of the father fall on the son. He said he wanted to wipe the whole bloodline out. Darius nodded. This was the moment. The why. Leo's father, Darius said to the jury, was Marcus Vance. 20 years ago, Marcus Vance filed a police brutality complaint against a rookie officer named Roman Thornfield. That complaint was dismissed, but it stalled Roman's promotion for 2 years. Marcus Vance died in prison 3 years later on a trumped-up possession charge. Darius turned to Roman. You didn't just frame a kid, did you, detective? You were hunting a ghost. You held a grudge for 2 decades against a man who dared to speak up against you, and you decided to destroy his son, to finish the job. Roman was shaking. His hands gripped the arms of the chair so hard the wood creaked. Marcus Vance was trash, he hissed. He spat in my face. He thought he was better than me. And Leo? Darius asked. What did Leo do? He exists, Roman spat. He's just another weed in my garden. I pull them out. That's what I do. You're not a gardener, Roman, Darius said, dropping the honorific. You're a blight. You're the disease this city is dying from. Roman surged to his feet, his face twisted into a mask of pure hate. He lunged toward the railing, pointing a finger at Darius. You think you've won? You think this ends here? I have friends, Pennington. I have brothers in blue who will make your life a living hell. You will never walk down a street safely again. I will... Enough! Judge Gray's voice was a thunderclap, but Roman was gone. The facade of the cool, collected detective had shattered completely, revealing the violent, petty tyrant underneath. He turned his rage on the judge. You shut up! Roman screamed at her. You sit there in your robe judging me? You have no idea what it takes to keep these streets clean. I do the dirty work so you can sleep at night. I am the hero here. He reached for his hip. It was a reflex, muscle memory. He was reaching for his service weapon, but he had surrendered his gun to the bailiff before taking the stand, as per protocol. His hand grasped at empty air. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He froze, his hand hovering over his empty hip. He looked at his hand, then at the bailiffs who had already drawn their tasers and were moving in. For the first time in his life, Roman Thornfield was unarmed. He was powerless. The courtroom was frozen in a tableau of shock. Roman stood in the witness box, his chest heaving, his hand still hovering near his waist. The bailiffs were flanking him, weapons trained on his chest. Judge Gray stood slowly. She looked tall, terrifyingly regal in her black robes. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked like the personification of judgment. "Detective Thornfield," she said, her voice deadly quiet. "Did you just attempt to draw a weapon on a presiding judge?" Roman blinked, the adrenaline crash hitting him hard. He looked around the room. He saw the horror on the jurors' faces. He saw Griffin Ashford staring at the floor, refusing to make eye contact. He saw Darius Pennington watching him with that same pitying expression that hurt more than hatred. Roman stammered. "I didn't. It was a mistake. I thought—" "You thought you were still in charge," Judge Gray finished for him. She looked down at her bench, picked up a pen, and wrote something on a sheet of paper. Then she looked up at the bailiffs. "Secure him," she ordered. The bailiffs moved in. Roman flinched as they grabbed his arms. "Get your hands off me. I'm a detective. You can't touch me." "Stop resisting, Roman," one of the bailiffs said. It was Sergeant Miller, a man Roman had worked with for 10 years. Miller didn't look sympathetic. He looked ashamed. They forced Roman's hands behind his back. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut, click, 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 echoed through the silent room. It was a sound Roman had heard thousands of times, a sound that usually meant victory. Now, it signaled his end. "Detective Roman Thornfield," Judge Gray announced, her voice ringing out. "I am holding you in direct criminal contempt of court. Furthermore, based on the evidence presented, specifically the digital recording of you fabricating evidence, I am finding probable cause to order your immediate arrest for perjury, obstruction of justice, and filing a false police report." She turned to the court reporter. "Strike the detective's testimony from the record. Refer the transcript of these proceedings and the digital evidence to the State Attorney General's office for immediate review. I am recommending a grand jury be convened to investigate not just this case, but every arrest Detective Thornfield has made in the last 5 years." A collective gasp went through the room. 5 years, hundreds of cases. It was a nuclear option. It would tear the department apart. It would free hundreds of potential criminals. But Judge Gray didn't care. She was burning the rot out. "And Mr. Ashford?" Judge Gray turned her gaze to the prosecution table. Griffin stood up, his legs trembling. "Yes, Your Honor." "You are an officer of this court. You have a duty of candor. If I find out you knew about this footage, or about the detective's history with the Vance family, you will be joining him in a cell. Do I make myself clear?" "Crystal clear, Your Honor," Griffin whispered. I will cooperate fully with the investigation." "See that you do." She turned back to Roman. He was struggling against the bailiffs, his face a mask of disbelief. "Take him away," Judge Gray said. "You can't do this!" Roman screamed as they dragged him toward the side door, the one leading to the holding cells, the cells where Leo had spent the last 3 months. "I am the police. I am the law. This is a travesty. Pennington, you hear me? You're dead. You're dead." His screams echoed down the hallway even after the heavy door slammed shut. Then silence fell. It wasn't an empty silence. It was a heavy, profound silence. The kind of silence that follows a great storm. Darius stood at his table. He felt a trembling in his hands and placed them flat on the wood to steady them. He looked at Haven Quinn in the gallery. She was crying silently, tears streaming over her tattoos. She nodded at him. He looked at the empty witness stand. The ghost of Roman's arrogance still seemed to linger there, but the man himself was gone. Darius packed his briefcase slowly. He felt exhausted, drained to his very soul. But as he clicked the latch shut, he felt a lightness he hadn't felt in years. He walked out of the courtroom, past the stunned jury, past the pale prosecutor. He pushed open the heavy double doors and stepped out into the hallway. The press was waiting. A wall of cameras and microphones. Mr. Pennington, is it true the charges were dropped?" Did the detective really plant evidence? What happens now? Darius stopped. He adjusted his cheap suit, straightened his tie. He looked into the camera lenses, knowing that somewhere in a precinct break room, other cops were watching, knowing that the system would try to fight back. What happens now, Darius said, his voice strong, is that we start over. We look at every file. We look at every conviction. Today, the shield didn't protect the lie. Today, the truth won. He pushed past them, walking toward the exit. He needed fresh air. He needed to breathe. But as he reached the courthouse steps, his phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. You won the battle. You haven't won the war. Watch your back. Darius stared at the screen. He looked around the busy street. Faces blurred. Cars honked. The city kept moving. He deleted the message and put the phone in his pocket. He knew it wasn't over. Men like Roman didn't disappear quietly. They had friends. They had reach. But Darius smiled. Let them come. He knew how to fight now. And he knew that even giants could bleed. The days following Roman Thornfield's arrest were not the victory lap Darius Pennington might have imagined. Instead, they were a siege. The city was a powder keg. The footage of Roman planting the necklace had gone viral, accumulating millions of views in hours. Protests had erupted outside the precinct, chants of "Release the files" echoing off the concrete. But inside the machinery of justice, the gears were grinding in reverse. The police union had immediately issued a statement calling the arrest a political stunt by an activist judge. Roman was out on bail within 6 hours, his legal fees covered by a shadowy benevolent fund. Darius sat in his small, cluttered office, the blinds drawn. A patrol car had been parked outside his building for 2 nights. They weren't protecting him. They were watching him. Every time he left to get coffee, he was followed. When he drove home, he was pulled over twice for failure to signal, citations that were clearly warnings. The text message from the unknown number, "Watch your back," burned in his mind. There was a knock at the back door of his office, the one that led to the alley. Darius froze. It was 11 p.m. He reached into his drawer, his hand brushing against the pepper spray he had started carrying, but then he heard a familiar, terrified voice. "Darius? It's Griffin. Open up." Darius unlocked the door. Griffin Ashford stumbled in, looking like a man who hadn't slept in a week. The prosecutor's expensive suit was rumpled, his tie loose, his eyes bloodshot. He smelled of stale scotch and fear. "They're going to kill me," Griffin whispered, collapsing into a chair. "Roman thinks I leaked the dash cam footage. He thinks I set him up." Darius leaned against his desk, crossing his arms. "Did you?" "No. I'm a coward, Darius, not a martyr." Griffin ran a hand through his hair. "But I know where the rest of it is. The leverage. The reason nobody has touched him for 20 years. Darius's interest peaked. "Talk." "Roman isn't just a dirty cop," Griffin said, his voice shaking. "He's a broker. For years, whenever he raided a drug house or a fence, he didn't just seize evidence. He seized insurance, blackmail material on judges, city council members, even the mayor, photos, financial records, dirty secrets." "Where is it?" "He has a storage unit, off the books, under the name Marcus Vance." Griffin let out a hysterical laugh. "He used the dead man's name. He thought it was funny." Darius felt a cold fury settle in his gut. "Why come to me? Why not the feds?" "Because the feds take too long," Griffin said. "And because Roman has guys inside the bureau, too. But you're crazy enough to burn it all down. I want a deal, Darius. I tell you where the unit is, I testify, and you get Judge Gray to give me immunity." "I can't promise immunity," Darius said grimly. "But I can promise that if you don't help me, you'll go down with him. And in prison, a former prosecutor is worth less than nothing." Griffin swallowed hard. He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket and slid it across the desk. "It's in the Navy Yard, Unit 404. He keeps a physical ledger, Darius. Names, dates, payoffs. If you get that book, the whole city government falls. Darius looked at the address. It was a trap, or it was the key to everything. One more thing, Griffin said, standing up. He knows about Haven Quinn. He knows she testified. He's going to hurt her, Darius. Tonight. Darius didn't wait. He grabbed his keys and bolted out the door. The game had changed. It wasn't about the law anymore. It was about survival. The rain was falling in sheets as Darius sped toward Haven Quinn's apartment complex, a dilapidated brick building on the east side. His heart hammered against his ribs. He called 911 on the hands-free, reporting a break-in in progress, but he knew the response time for this neighborhood. He was on his own. He screeched to a halt in front of the building. The front door was busted open. Darius didn't think. He ran up the stairs, taking them two at a time. He reached the third floor and saw Haven's door ajar. He heard a crash inside, the sound of breaking glass, and a scream. He burst into the room. Roman Thornfield was there. He wasn't wearing a uniform. He was in dark civilian clothes, a baseball bat in his hand. Haven was cornered in the kitchen, brandishing a kitchen knife, her face bruised but defiant. "You rat!" Roman screamed, raising the bat. "You think you can ruin me?" "Roman!" Darius shouted. Roman spun around. His eyes were wild, dilated pupils swallowing the iris. He looked like a man possessed. "Pennington, I should have known. You two belong together in the gutter." "It's over, Roman," Darius said, holding his hands up, stepping slowly into the room. "The police are on their way. Real police. Not your friends." "My friends are the police!" Roman laughed, swinging the bat loosely. "You think a little video stops me? I run this city. I have files on everyone. I'll be back on the force in a month, and you'll be a tragic, unsolved homicide." "You mean the files in Unit 404? Darius asked quietly. Roman froze. The bat lowered an inch. "What did you say?" "The Navy Yard," Darius pressed. "The ledger. Griffin told me everything." The color drained from Roman's face. For the first time, the confidence cracked. The leverage was his shield, his immunity idol. If Darius knew about it, the shield was gone. "Griffin is a liar," Roman snarled, but his voice lacked conviction. "He's a survivor," Darius said. "And he just sold you out to save his own skin. The feds are raiding the unit right now, Roman. They're seizing the blackmail, the money, the trophies." It was a bluff. Darius hadn't called the feds yet. He hadn't had time. But Roman didn't know that. Roman let out a roar of inarticulate rage and charged at Darius. Darius wasn't a fighter. He was a lawyer. But he had grown up fighting for every inch of ground he stood on. He didn't back down. As Roman swung the bat, Darius ducked, the wood splintering against the doorframe. Darius tackled Roman around the waist, driving him back into the living room. They crashed onto the coffee table, glass shattering underneath them. Roman was stronger, heavier. He threw Darius off like a rag doll. He scrambled up, raising the bat for a killing blow. Darius was on his back, winded, staring up at death. Pop. The sound was small, almost insignificant. Roman stiffened. He dropped the bat. He looked down at his leg. A small red flower was blooming on his thigh. He turned. Haven Quinn stood there, a small, pearl-handled revolver in her shaking hand. It was an old piece, a Saturday night special. "I told you," Haven said, her voice trembling but hard as steel. "You're not going to hurt my family anymore." Roman fell to one knee, clutching his leg. He looked up at Haven with shock. You shot a cop." "I shot an intruder," she spat. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. This time they were coming fast. Darius scrambled up, kicking the bat away. He grabbed his phone. "Stay down, Roman, it's over." When the uniformed officers burst in, state troopers, not city cops, called in by Judge Gray's earlier order, they found Roman Thornfield bleeding on the floor, surrounded by the shattered remnants of his ego. Darius handed the troopers the address for the storage unit. "Go there," he told the commanding officer. "If you want to know why this city is broken, go there." By morning, the news broke. The FBI had raided the unit. They found millions in cash, drugs stolen from evidence lockers, and the Black Ledger. The list of names implicated went all the way to the deputy mayor. Roman Thornfield wasn't just a dirty cop anymore. He was the patient zero of a corruption epidemic, and he was all alone, 6 months later. The courtroom was packed, but the atmosphere was different. The fear was gone. In its place was a solemn, heavy anticipation. Darius sat in the front row. He wasn't the defense attorney today. He was a witness, a victim, the man who started the avalanche. Roman Thornfield sat at the defense table. He looked small. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by an orange jumpsuit. His head was shaved. He had lost 30 pounds. The swagger that had defined him was extinguished, leaving behind a bitter, hollow shell. He had pleaded guilty. There was no other choice. The evidence in the ledger was overwhelming. He had turned on everyone he knew in a desperate attempt to reduce his sentence. But the DA, a new one, brought in from out of state, wasn't making deals. Judge Rosalind Gray adjusted her glasses. She looked at Roman with a mixture of disappointment and resolve. "Roman Thornfield," she began, her voice echoing in the silent room. "You were entrusted with the highest power a society can grant, the power to take away a person's freedom. You used that power not to protect, but to prey. You built a kingdom on the suffering of the vulnerable. You hunted families like sport." Roman stared at the table. He didn't look up. "You spoke often of trash and animals in your private recordings," the judge continued. "You viewed the citizens of this city as beneath you. But the irony, Mr. Thornfield, is that in your arrogance, you became the very thing you claim to despise. You are a criminal." She shuffled her papers. "For the charges of racketeering, perjury, aggravated assault, and multiple counts of civil rights violations, I sentence you to 45 years in a federal penitentiary. You will not be eligible for parole until you are 85 years old." The gavel came down. Bang. It was a sound of finality, a sound of cleansing. Roman flinched. He looked back at the gallery. He saw the faces of the people he had hurt. Leo Vance was there, looking healthy, holding his aunt's hand. Griffin Ashford was not there. He was already serving his time in a minimum security facility, having testified against the others. Roman's eyes met Darius's. Darius didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply nodded. "I am a police officer!" Roman shouted suddenly, a desperate, broken cry as the marshals hauled him up. "I saved this city! You'll miss me when the wolves come!" "The only wolf in this room is you, Roman," Darius said softly, though nobody but the marshals heard him. They dragged him out. The door slammed shut. The era of Roman Thornfield was over. Darius walked out of the courthouse into the bright spring sunlight. The air smelled different, cleaner. Leo Vance was waiting for him at the bottom of the steps. The young man extended a hand. "Thank you, Mr. Pennington," Leo said, "for saving my life." Darius shook his hand firmly. "You saved yourself, Leo. You survived. That's the hardest part." "What will you do now?" Haven asked, leaning on her cane, looking younger than she had in years. Darius looked back at the courthouse. He thought about the empty office, the low pay, the late nights. He thought about the text messages and the fear. "I have a stack of files on my desk," Darius said, smiling. "People who need help. The system is still broken, Haven. Roman was just one crack." "Yeah," Haven smiled. "But you know how to fix it now." "One case at a time," Darius said. He watched them walk away, a family reunited. He loosened his tie, took a deep breath of the free air, and turned to walk back to his office. There was work to do. The fall of Roman Thornfield didn't fix the world. Corruption is a weed. Pull it out and the roots remain deep. But that day in court proved something essential, that even the most powerful walls can be breached if you strike them in the right spot, with the truth as your hammer. Darius Pennington didn't just win a case. He exposed a rot that had been festering in the dark for decades. He proved that justice isn't a gift given by the powerful. It's a territory that must be fought for, inch by bloody inch. Karma didn't just hit Roman. It obliterated him, not through magic, but through the relentless persistence of a man who refused to be humiliated. The silence that fell in that courtroom wasn't just shock. It was the sound of the balance shifting. It was the sound of the voiceless finally being heard. This story isn't just fiction. It's a reflection of battles happening in courtrooms every single day. If you believe in justice, if you believe that nobody should be above the law, then you need to make your voice heard too. Don't let the story end here. Hit that like button to support content that matters. Share this video with someone who needs to see the underdog win. And subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story about justice served cold.